Hello, I'm Mehdi Sandaji and welcome to another episode of Nucleus 195's Pro Insights. Today we're speaking with Sandy Jairaj, founder at Perspectrum. Sandy, welcome.
Hi, Mehdi. Thanks very much for having me on.
Absolutely. And we've got lots and lots to talk about today. So let's dive right in. Can you tell me a bit about your background and what led you to found Perspectrum?
Sure, Mehdi. So I actually started off studying engineering at university, but interestingly ended up with a 25-year career in finance, capital markets, and 5 years in sustainability intelligence. So a bit of a varied career. But going back to the beginning, after graduating, I trained as a chartered accountant at Pricewaterhouse, now PwC, and I spent almost 7 years there in a number of roles, including audit, transaction services, finishing up in learning and development. And then a chance encounter with a friend of mine, actually on Dover Street, led me to join Morgan Stanley, where I spent more than 18 years in a variety of roles. I was a global media and tech specialist salesman. I then spent a few years in Hong Kong, creating and managing the content development team for Morgan Stanley Asia. And we were tasked there really with improving the monetization of ideas generated from all of the different offices across the region. So, for example, historically, if our FX team had made a call on the Indian rupee, that would have just resulted in FX trades. But what about impact on exporters, so equity ideas, rates ideas, derivatives, corporate access? Really, how do we capture ideas across multiple different venues? And then back in London, I spent time on the Asian sales desk here before setting up and running a European quant sales team. And we had two goals there. So can we help quantitative investors understand fundamentals? And can I help fundamental investors understand quantitative techniques? So then an opportunity came up to work with Nick Feingold, who previously founded and exited Execution Noble. I know you know that very, very well, Mehdi. And that was really to work at his next business, Curation. So I joined as COO in 2019 to help him focus and scale that business. And Curation's mission was to try and help people deal with the overwhelm of information. And so when I later became CEO of Curation, I sought to evolve how Curation added value to its clients in managing all that content and information overwhelm. So we went from pure curating to adding insightful commentary to thinking laterally and joining the dots between, I guess, sometimes seemingly disparate themes. But the ultimate aim was to help people and organizations get to insights quicker. Now, a change of direction at Curation and feedback from clients and partners really encouraged me to start something for myself. And so earlier this year, I founded Perspectrum. And, I think from all of that, you can see, Mehdi, that from my time at PwC, through the various roles at Morgan Stanley, onto my time at Curation, there were a couple of common threads as to how I help my clients and colleagues. I'd really summarize those down into two things. So first of all, helping people understand sometimes complex topics in a simple, concise, and also importantly, relevant way. And secondly, helping people think holistically and laterally to try and gain new perspectives and new insights. And these are really the things that I've taken forward along with that varied experience to Perspectrum and our mission to help people make purposeful and sustainable decisions.
Well, that's quite the journey you've had over several years, and it's brought you to where we are today. So what is Perspectrum?
Well, interesting question. It's a new word that really, I think, encapsulates our thought process. So I strongly believe that we've got quite an interconnected world now. There's not many themes that are mutually exclusive. And so I think it's important to shift one perspective as well as start to think more holistically. So I don't mean necessarily thinking outside the box, which is the thing that's often quoted, but really it's about aligning the many boxes across the full spectrum of themes to gain the right perspective. Now, the best way I can think of illustrating one of the problems of having a single perspective is with a small exercise. So I want you to take a look at this image. You should be able to see some splodges of color. Don't worry, it should look slightly out of focus. I want you to just keep staring at the screen and you'll notice there's a black dot towards the center. So start to focus on that black dot. Keep looking at it, keep looking at the black dot. And regardless of what I say, keep looking at the black dot. And while still looking at the black dot, what's happening to those splodges of color?
I feel like they're fading away.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, this is something, and you're experiencing something called the Troxler effect or Troxler fading. And this really demonstrates.
I'm just losing my sight there for a moment, Sandy. Sorry.
sorry. That was a lateral effect. But yeah, this Troxler fading it sort of demonstrates a couple of things. So the first thing is much of what we actually see is really up in here. It's in our brains. It's not really our eyes. Our eyes gather information, but what we actually perceive and see is in our brains. But secondly, that we're creatures adapted for change. So it's an example of a neural adaptation, or in other words, information in the periphery, so those splodges of color, they're not actually changing. And so because you're not focusing on them, they actually disappear from your awareness. Or in other words, you feel like you know about them, so you don't need to focus on them anymore. And this is actually what can happen when we receive the same type of content structured in the same way with the same angle. But I think sustainability requires us to think beyond those traditional siloed industry or geographical lines that we're used to receiving insights and content. And so changing our perspectives can help us see some of those insights that, as I say, are normally hiding in plain sight. In many cases, the knowledge is already there. We just need to be able to see it. So what are some of the exercises I do with people? Well, I think one of the most basic ways is look at a high-level principle, lift your head, turn it 90 degrees, and try and apply that to a different geography or industry and ask, okay, now what happens in those scenarios? And that often triggers ideas and new ways of thinking. Another approach is to reframe a question. So consider the following. In the built environment, a common question that gets asked is, how do we heat or cool the home? Seems like a perfectly reasonable question. But let's look at that language. It's actually pushing us towards a focus on the energy or the fuel source required to heat or cool the home. Now let's consider a slightly different framing. How do we enable people to keep their homes at an appropriate temperature efficiently? Now that's a bit more open. It encourages a bit more of a holistic thought process. And it brings in not only the energy source to vary temperature, but also ways in which we can prevent wastage, enable people to do these things through funding and resources, or indeed identify what appropriate temperature even means. So you can see that just by reframing, suddenly we've got a lot more avenues for exploring investment opportunities.
Sandy, you've got my brain thinking in multiple directions already. I was on your website earlier, and you have a great tagline on there. To make great decisions, you need to have the right perspective. How do you deliver that perspective to your customers? And, where can we go from here?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of ways in which I help my clients, but I'll sort of highlight a couple of key ways. The first one is I provide strategic advice. So in some cases, I'm helping businesses engage with sustainability for the first time who maybe don't know where to start, or investors who are wanting to apply a sustainability lens or ESG lens to their investments. But in other cases, it's also helping businesses that are already quite engaged, but just want to be more effective. And so that's about helping them find new perspectives to make that engagement more relevant, material, and impactful. And that materiality is something we'll definitely talk about in further sessions. The second main offering is what I'd class as thought leadership. So that can be bespoke project work, analysing a specific topic for a client, or through the work that I do with the Sustainable Investor blog. And one of my partners, Stephen Bowen, who's a very experienced 30-year veteran fund manager and sustainability expert. The Sustainable Investor blog, it's aimed at anyone involved in investing decisions with a sustainability emphasis. So asset managers, owners, family offices, investor relations, C-suite risk teams and comms specialists. And in the articles that we write there, we always try to make people think about a topic or a piece of news in a different way. So we try to challenge their thinking away from that traditional sector focus, help them find new opportunities and solutions, or indeed problems and risks that they need to think about in helping them either make decisions or arrive at valuations.
So, Sandy, who are your customers, and also who should be seeking your services?
Yeah, so look, our customers are both corporates and asset managers, and individuals involved in both of those. Now, Perspectrum, we're not regulated, and our blogs and all of our website content, they're solely for information purposes and should not be construed as investment research as defined by the FCA and other regulators. So I had to get that in there. However, it is designed to help investors identify avenues that they might not otherwise have thought about. So some examples of clients that we have include a listed biotech company that is actually very engaged with sustainability and ESG, but they wanted some help to understand how to be even more effective with both their strategy and their communications. And so I was helping them make connections between different themes that they're exposed to, whilst ensuring that they remained relevant to their business and their stakeholders. Another example is a technology, where it's really a data company in the ESG space. And they were technology experts, but they wanted help thinking about different ways to bring their insights to life to make them relevant, again, for the corporate world and the investing world. And then we also have asset managers and owners who subscribe to the Sustainable Investor, and that we do some bespoke work for as well. But in terms of use cases, I can probably summarize as follows: 4 use cases. So the first one I've already mentioned, those are looking to engage with sustainability either for the first time or just want to be more effective. Secondly, people who are bandwidth constrained but want to follow the evolution of sustainability themes that are relevant to their business. Thirdly, people who want to demonstrate their engagement in sustainability to their stakeholders. So that could be their shareholders, their employees, their customers. And finally, people who want to understand and follow sustainability and are involved in investment decisions. So that's your asset managers, IR, risk, etc.
Fantastic. You mentioned the Sustainable Investor blog a few times. That sounds very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. It's so the Sustainable Investor blog actually comprises 2 things. There's a free weekly product where we talk about 8 topics, and again, always with a fresh angle why we think they're important for both investors and also corporates. And as I say, that's free. And then we have behind a paywall a number of long form blogs. And these blogs will range from 1,500 words all the way to 5,000 words. So they're a bit more in depth, and with lots of links to further reading, academic research, etc. I'll give you 3 examples of things we've written about recently. So the first one is called Simple and Ancient. And this is really focusing on the built environment. The built environment is really quite a key decarbonisation and social and health and well-being problem. And it sort of also helps to illustrate, I think, a common challenge in our desire to find and roll out investable solutions. It's sort of human nature to tend to look too much toward new technologies and innovations, and sometimes ignore what we already know works. So, of course, new technologies and innovations will be key, and actually we do discuss those in a later blog. But in this blog, Simple and Ancient, I look at how ancient approaches do have a place in the modern world, and we actually look at some modern investable equivalents as well. The second example is a primer on AMR. AMR is antimicrobial resistance. It's perhaps the biggest macro threat alongside climate change. So it's absolutely crucial that investors, corporates are at least aware of this as a threat. And in the primer, we help to get people up the curve on the issue, but also talk about there being plenty of ways to address it, not just from the biological or chemical perspective, but also the physical, behavioral, and funding and incentives perspective that are all equally important. And the final example I wanted to talk about is a blog entitled Cancer and PM 2.5. Now, PM2.5 is a form of very small particulate matter that's found in air pollution. And in the blog, we look at the link between particulate matter, air pollution, and certain types of lung cancer. That's quite interesting because we normally assume air pollution impacts respiratory function and diseases like this, but some scientists have actually found a direct causal link with certain types of lung cancer. And we also look at how that mechanism might lead to alternative therapies. And, again, that's an example of us taking one issue and topic and sort of trying to apply it in a slightly different way. But there's so much to talk about there. I'd love to talk more about some of those innovations in much more detail in later sessions, Mehdi.
Absolutely. And Sandy, you had me on the edge of my seat, and I'm kind of hooked. I want to hear more now, but we'll definitely come back and we'll dig deeper into some of these innovations. But thank you so much for taking the time to tell us a bit about Perspectrum. Thank
you very much for having me, Mehdi. Look forward to chatting again.
Absolutely. And we will be connecting again soon and hearing more about those innovations. To all of our viewers, thank you so much for watching, and good luck investing.